investigation time on this. I've already done one little job, which is down here. I'll put some new connectors on those wires and hook that up. I don't know if that switch works or not. Previous owner said she didn't think it does, so we'll wait and see. If need be, I'll do a jumper cable like I did on the Maestro. I was having some thoughts about this, and I'm wondering if maybe it hasn't blown the head gasket and instead the head bolts just need retorquing because of how recently this was done. So I popped off the oil cap and that's really clean. In fact, everything in there looks really clean. And if this had blown the head gasket the way I think it has, then I would have expected to see some condensation or mayonnaising in there, you know, something, and there just isn't. So I have had it before when I've done a head gasket and the head bolts needed retorquing and it presents exactly like a blown head gasket because, well, it's not making a good enough seal. With that in mind, I'm going to pop this rocker cover off and I'm going to see what these head bolts are like. If they're all torqued down perfectly fine, then yes, I will take the head off and we'll do that. If they're a little bit loose, I'll retorque them, just run the van, get it up to temperature and see what happens. And if it overheats almost instantly, like it was doing, then yeah, it's probably the head gasket. If it doesn't, it's probably the head bolts. But we'll see. 13mm on these. And there's 3. From what I remember when I had the 6, it's a bit of a wiggle to get this off. It's nice they're not over tightened. It's a common problem. That breather off. Oh, they're a bit of a bear to get off these. Everything's in your way. I'm going to have to remove you, probably. Just the little bracket here for the throttle cable is fouling. Not letting me get things off. Rocker cover seal looks in good shape still, so I'm not worrying about that. I'll just clean the surfaces up before we put it back together. And honestly, that's really nice and clean in there too. But not like steam cleaned, it just looks ordinary cleaned, so that bodes well. Got my torque wrench, and I've had a look in the book and it reckons 60 Newton meters. So let's see how we are. That was a bit loose. As was that. Oh, happy days if this is all it was, but we'll see. That one was a lot loose. That one's a pain to get to. These are all loose. think I might have found the problem. I've just done that one. Oh wow, that one's really loose. So, a thing, like I was saying earlier, that I learned. Sometimes when you do the head, after a while you have to go in and check. They don't always back out, but sometimes they do, and it looks like this one did. I hope that's why it was doing what it was doing, because honestly up here there's no real sign of the usual head gasket issue. It was all in the expansion bottle over here, and it was putting steam out the back, which again is another sign that it's, you know, head gasket. Now, I might still need to pull this off. I am aware it may have damaged the actual head gasket, but I'm also aware the previous owner, when there was an overheating issue, they kind of stopped driving it. Same for me. As soon as that light came on, it stopped. So it's not being driven with a blown head, which is good. Only for like nursing it to the side of the road sort of situation. So hopefully this is all it is. I'm just going to go around and just double check these are all right now that everything's torqued down, and then we'll start it and then we'll see if it behaves. I'm not going to refit this properly. I'm just going to put it on to stop the oil splashing, and then if this is happy, I'll put it on right. It's not an overhead cam engine, so it's not something I really need to worry about that much. Right, wish me luck. Ticking away very happily. I think I'm going to have to take it for a drive around the block. It is fully road legal, it's all MOT and everything, but it's not getting hot, and before it was getting hot really quickly. So I think I need to just drive it a bit, get some heat in it, because it's very cold today, and then we'll see what it does. But right now it's behaving like a normal van, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's fixed. So let's give that a try and find out what it does. Quick whiz around the block, things I have learned. That switch doesn't work, so I've just bridged it, the fan is on. Did get further with it, but the overheating light is on and I'm getting no cooling at the moment from that fan. So yeah, it looks like it's not going to be an easy fix. Also, there's only cold air coming out of here. There could be an airlock. Fiddle with these leaders. There we go. Get anything to come out. coolant's not looking too clever either. It is building pressure though. It's blowing some bubbles, but they're more... Oh, there we go, there's the blub. Not as oily as it was. I'm still not sure about this. I don't know what temperature this comes on, and I've no idea what the temperature is on the engine at the moment, so I don't know how catastrophic that is. Other things I have learned, the tracking is very off, and the gear change is awful. So I don't like the gear change in this car very much. It's not very confidence inspiring. But other than that, it is fun. I've just got to figure out what's going on here. One thing I was going to try and do to aid with the cooling, because I've only got cold air coming out here, got a little bit lukewarm, was you just crank the heater on full, but the thing is, that's not supposed to do that. So there's something funky going on with the controls, so I suspect these aren't actually opening properly, because even the directional one, it's not supposed to do that. So I'll need to have a look in there. We're still hot. I have turned it off with the fan running to try and cool it down, but it's still hot. I just don't know how much hot. Except I sort of do. It's this much too hot. Now, on these engines you have little bleed screws on the hoses because they're terrible for air locking. So you're supposed to take those out, and that's supposed to help all the air come out. And you're supposed to lift the expansion bottle as high as you can. Again, to aid in bleeding all the air out. Now, the interesting thing I've noticed is I'm not getting as much air bubbles in here, and I'm not getting as much fluid mixture. And while I haven't done a compression test, I am wondering if there's an airlock. I'm pretty sure this is a blown head gasket now, but I'm also trying to rule everything else out, just to make sure, and I mean, that's just ridiculous. Yeah, I hate this stage of a job because you don't know exactly what's amiss. I'm going to let all this cool down for a bit. I started getting coolant out through the bleed valves, but it just, yeah, I don't think there was an air block after all. I think it has blown the head, and I'm just trying to make sure it hasn't. But I mean, the head bolts were loose, so that won't have helped. Once I screwed those in as well, we did get some bubbles, but not as many. So the next thing I'm going to do, just to be absolutely certain, even though we all know what this is, I'm going to take the plugs out and do a compression test. And that will tell me where the problem likely is. Now, if it turns out that the compression test is fine, which I'm not expecting, then maybe it's to do with the heater core, which is in here somewhere. And maybe the heater core being blocked is causing a problem. But it's probably that the head gasket's gone, and I need to get the head sent off. Would have been nice if it was just a case of tightening the head bolts down. But I guess it's not this time. That's pretty good. That is... Oh, it's getting on for 130 psi. I expected that to be a lot less than that. Alright, I'll go through the rest. You're in my way at the minute, and I'll report back. And we've got 125 on compression, so that's respectable. What's interesting is we've got 120 on this cylinder, so I've only got one cylinder left, which obviously is the most difficult one. So if it's not low on compression on that cylinder, that's interesting. we have a lot of compression. So what's going on? It's now maybe there wasn't any compression before I tightened the head bolts back down, and now there is. But honestly, the range of compression on there kind of says it's not a blown head, and the overheating could be something else. Now there is one little problem with these engines, which is they are wetliner engines, and I know from when I rebuilt the 6's engine that there are little gaskets underneath the wetliners. If the wetliners have been disturbed, then your coolant and oil can mix, and that can present the same way as a head gasket. But I'm not getting the level of fluid mixture I would expect for that sort of failure. So I'm unconvinced it's that. I'm of the opinion at the moment that this isn't a head gasket failure. I think this is an airlock, and I think this is related to why the heater controls don't work and why the heater is cold. So I'm unwilling to pull the head off at the moment. I'm genuinely unwilling to do it because I don't think that's where my problem is. If one of these cylinders had got really low compression or was really way out of spec compared to the others, yeah, I'd believe that. But they're not. And the more I've run the car, the less air bubbles I'm getting in the expansion bottle. The coolant doesn't look clearer, but it's not getting dirtier. I'm not getting any emulsion anywhere. I'm not getting any of the usual signs. All I've got is an overheating problem. And an overheating problem doesn't necessarily mean a failed head gasket. I also know with this engine, they are prone, when you do any kind of engine work on them, to overheating for no reason, and you just have to bleed the air out and bleed it out and bleed it out, and they're a pain. So I think that might be what this is. I don't think this is a head rebuild that's required. So I'm going to try and investigate down that route and see if I can fix it, because this one is very confusing. Very confusing. I don't think the temperature gauge is... I say the temperature gauge. I don't think the temperature light on the dash is coming on too soon. It's clearly getting very hot. You could see steam coming out, so it's definitely getting too hot. It might also be that I've got it so hot because the fan wasn't running that it's just not been able to cool down. So once this is all cooled down, I'll put a proper jumper cable in so that the fan is constantly on for the radiator, and then we'll see what it does. If it still gets too hot, I don't know. This is a weird one, but I have seen other people post about their Renault 4s with similar problems, where they just had a random overheating problem, and it did turn out to be, usually, to do with the heater core and to do with an airlock in the system. So I hope that's what this is. But we'll just have to wait and see. I've been doing some more investigation, running, that sort of thing. I've opened up all of the valves on the hoses and just had the car sitting at idle until the temperature light came on. And I have to say, I wasn't noticing any of the usual symptoms until... Now bearing in mind, the lights come on, there's steam coming out of these. So I shouldn't be able to do that. The radiator is absolutely stone cold. So I wonder if the radiator's blocked, or the thermostat isn't opening. Like, would a stuck thermostat cause this, maybe? So what's happening is I'm not getting coolant circulation, so the car's overheating, presenting like a blown head gasket, when that's not what's happening. Also, the expansion bottle, this is what it suggests in the manual to do when you're trying to bleed the air out. The detritus in there could be from the previous head gasket job, because it can take a while for everything to flush through. So I'm not convinced that this has blown the head. I think this is probably a blocked radiator or a stuck thermostat or something like that, or something to do with the heater controls. Now I've just pulled the knobs off to try and get this fascia off. I'm going to have to do some learning. Yeah, I think there's a blockage in the coolant system. I think that's what the problem is. Okay. I have been fighting with brittle French plastics, and I think I think I'm getting somewhere with some problem solving here. One of the issues has been that the heater doesn't put out hot, and looking at the controls, it looks like whatever it is that helps the controls go into their location is stuck. So I've had a look in the Haynes manual to figure out how to do it, and it seems to suggest removing the entire dashboard, which I'm not going to do, and instead I found another workaround. My first mishap was the ashtray, which I forgot I hadn't emptied out. The van doesn't smell like a smoker's van, so I didn't think to even look in the ashtray, and I should have done. I had to pop the aftermarket radio out so that I could get this out, but the ashtray, all of this is very hard to show you. You open the ashtray and there's two screws down there that you can get to, and you undo those, and they're Torx heads. Almost everything on this is, which is a bit annoying. And then you can slide that out. It does say to unplug it. I've decided not to, because I don't need to. And then to get this out, your heater control panel, you don't take the knobs off. You find these tabs and you push them in, and then you push the whole unit into the dashboard and out through the ashtray hole. I removed the clock, but I probably didn't need to, and I can't figure out how to get the hazard warning switch off, which might have made it easier because you can see the slots you're supposed to access. So it's a little bit tricky to do. Right, and what has gone awry is these cables here are your heater controls. So when you turn one of the knobs, it brings around a dial there. And you can see with this one, it's a bit stiff. And this is the heat, so heat and cold. This one had stuck, and I've actually managed to free that off. You can't really see it at the moment, but I'll show you when I get the tripod set up. This side doesn't want to free up. This is your direction, and it's just moving the cable and the sheath all as one unit. I think it's just lack of use. I had this with the Maestro, all the controls were stuck, and after some use they freed up. Because generally, when you've had a car a while, you find the setting you like and it stays there, and I think that's what's happened with this. So I just have to fiddle about with that a little bit. If I'm feeling brave, I'll squeeze that little plastic tab there and pull the cable off, and then I can probably manipulate that a little bit better and free it off. I'm loath to use any sort of grease or lubricant on this at the moment. I'd rather get it free moving because these cables are usually Teflon lined, so they're usually okay and you don't need to put anything extra in. It's just going to require a bit of fiddling, and it's difficult to film. Well, this is really hard to show you because it's just difficult getting the camera in, but I have got this cable here to free off. So there you go. You've got lots of cable, and then not so much. So these are now freed off, which is great. I'm going to reinstall this little unit here, and hopefully that means I've got a working heater now. Fingers crossed. It's not the funnest job, this, I will admit. You'll have to excuse a slightly wonky camera angle here. I've got everything back in. It's funny, I don't remember that sitting that far in, but maybe it does. Anyway, this bit always works. This is your fan speed control. I didn't have any problems with that at all. But this one, I mean, it's doing it a bit now, but it used to, if you try to do that, it would spin all the way back round. So this one's better. This one now goes to all the various settings. But what you need to do, and leaving the ashtray out for a while, is if you reach under here, there's the cables, and you just sort of have to hold onto the cable and use them. And I think I'm going to have to do a little bit of that just to get everything freed up, because these just haven't been used in a very long time. And I'm in the way. But yeah, I think if you hold onto the cable through the gap here, this isn't a permanent solution, this is just how you have to fix it. You can then operate the cable holding the outer sheath, and it just means everything will free up with time. It's just going to need me to do this quite a bit. I don't need the ashtray, so it's not a problem for me, but what it does mean is I can open the heater flap up and set it to windscreen, and then hopefully I can run the van, get it up to temperature, and see what comes out the top here. Okay, we have got fans set to hot, the fan is on, as you can hear, and I just have cold air coming out of here, but it's hot. Now, we know we've got good compression, and on here, cold, hot-ish, not so hot I'd expect the temperature gauge to come on. So, why is it that it's cold coming into the water pump and cold coming out? It's hot here, where it goes from the water pump to the radiator. I'm not going to touch the radiator at the moment because the fan's running, but I strongly suspect the radiator is also absolutely stone cold. So it could be a couple of things. It could be this temperature switch here is a little bit oversensitive. Previous owner, she did think it was. Could be a stuck thermostat, could be a block radiator, could be an airlock. It's just a bit peculiar, because these are your heater hoses here, and these are stone cold. Which is very odd. Oh, that one's just warming up. Just. Yeah, if it's overheating, I shouldn't be able to handle that like that. That might just be heat soak though from... Yeah, that's like the temperature I would expect it to be now for a running engine. Yeah, something somewhere is blocked, I think. I think that's what the problem is. The other thought, and I hope it isn't, is the water pump might have gone bad. So I might not be getting any circulation. Except the expansion bottle, I do get coolant in there. There's a coolant flow issue. I think that's the problem. I don't think it's a head gasket. I think it's a coolant flow issue. Just crack this bleed screw off here. It's still cold. The other interesting thing, this hose is hot. That's the one to the top of the radiator. This one is cold. The very top of the radiator on this side is hot. Everywhere else I can touch where I'm not going to be interfering with the fan, stone cold. I think there's a blocked radiator. I think the water pump is actually working because I think the water pump's actually pushing the hot water this way into the radiator like it should. But I think the radiator's blocked. Right, well, I guess I'm pulling the radiator off then, or something. This has been a bit of a messy job, but not too bad. To remove the radiator on these, it's really easy. There's a spring clip there that you lift up, and then you pull the radiator out. Disconnect the hoses, and you're done. Brilliant, love it. I've flushed through the radiator, it did have some rubbish in it. That's all running clear now through all the various ports, same with the bottle. I'm happy about that one. The only obstruction I have is this hose. And I've not looked in the book yet, so I don't know for definite, but I think I've got a stuck thermostat. And I think that's causing the problem, because the temperature sender's back here. And everything from here to this point here gets too hot, and that's why it's overheating. But then everything after that point, it's just cold. So this is our blockage at this point. I've worked my way back to it. I haven't really flushed that much rubbish out of the system either, to be honest with you, which would explain why everything was nice and clean in there. I'm going to pull this pipe off and see what I find. I'm hoping that the thermostat I've got in stock is the right kind, because the Princess uses a Renault 5 thermostat, and this is a Renault 5, so I might even be able to fix it today. That would be nice. I am very happy. This is the thermostat out of the car, and this is the spare one for the Princess, because when the Princess had the wax stat situation a while ago, I put a Renault 5 thermostat in and bought a spare in case I ever needed one. I didn't plan on getting a Renault 5. This one opens and closes in a pan of boiling water. This one doesn't. So I think the issue has actually been two things. I think it's been a stuck thermostat, and I think it's been, you know, slightly loose head bolts, which sometimes happens when a head job has been done. So I'm going to install this. I'm going to put all the pipes back on. I'm going to put some water in it, but not coolant, just plain water just in case, and we'll see if it wants to actually circulate some coolant this time. Fingers crossed this is the fix, because if it is, that means this fix has cost me no money at all, because it's all stuff I already have. If you've not done one of these Renault 5 thermostats before, they might look a little bit strange, because a lot of them are like a little UFO thing that goes in a socket, sort of that way up. But these live inside the hose, and you have to make sure that the sensor copper bit is sticking out the end of the hose, and then this side is inside the hose. Now, one advantage for me is because this hose has already had a thermostat put in, there's already a ridge there, and you have two Jubilee clamps, or similar hose clamps, and they just keep the thermostat in place. And that's it, and then you just shove that on the water pump. The other thing that's worth noting, in the book at least, it suggests to line up the bleed hole, which I assume are these sections here, with the bleed screw in the hose. So I've already done that as I've pushed it in. Now it's just a case of plugging everything back together and filling it up. Happy days. A couple of different things this time. The first thing I noticed is when I did the bleed screws here, instead of nothing coming out, there we go. You actually get coolant coming out of there, which means there's actually some flow, which is brilliant. This is the one after the thermostat. The thermostat's in here. Oh, these two pipes now are actually warm. That's brilliant. Bottom rad hose is warming up. That one's sensibly warm. The bottom of the radiator is getting warm now as well. That's brilliant. I've actually got some coolant flow now. And you can see here they've got all the little air bubbles coming out. You just have to do this for a while to get it all unlocked. You know what? I think I fixed it. Now, start of the day, when I started this job, I tried to take this just round the block, and I didn't get round the block before it overheated on me. This time, I took it a little bit further, and I can't get it to overheat. I just can't. The heaters are blowing hot now, which is great. They're actually blowing a little bit hotter than I wanted them to, which is a good sign. I'm not seeing any fresh oil in the coolant. I'm not seeing any signs of coolant in the oil. I'm not seeing bubbles in the expansion bottle. So I think the head gasket failure was quite literally the head bolts just needed retorquing. And I think that's all it was. And I think it was caught early enough that we didn't cause any problems, which is brilliant. Obviously, I'll keep an eye on it because you never know. the overheating issue was clearly that bad thermostat. I put the spare in I happened to have. There's a lesson in never throwing anything away. And it's fixed the problem. I've got proper coolant flow now. The heaters work now. I'm so happy that I managed to fix it, and it didn't cost me a penny. Oh, and obviously, time of year, I am going to make sure some proper coolant goes in now that I know it's okay. So I won't leave it just on plain water. That would be a very silly thing to do. Well, that success was short-lived. I've just done a much shorter drive in the van because I'm trying to get it used before the MOT comes up. And this thermostat I put in that was fine has failed and is stuck closed. You can hear the bubbling. I had one other minor issue, which was this clamp here just needed tightening up. That's fairly normal. I'm going to pull the thermostat out completely. I'm just going to run it without one for a bit. I don't understand why the thermostat isn't opening. Maybe it needs a slightly longer sensor to come into this area. I have no idea. But really, that's a pain. That's really a pain. I've not blown the head or anything. It's just, you know, these are warm, the heater hoses. This one is hot, but the radiator, stone cold. So, what a nuisance. Easy to resolve at least. It just means, well, just the awkwardness of not having a thermostat. But I think we'll cope. I'm a bit confused on this one because I took the thermostat out and it was open. It was bone dry, but it was open. And we are back to this nonsense. I'm getting no coolant flow, so maybe it's the water pump. Maybe the water pump has died. The brand new water pump that's just been installed by the previous owner. Because I know I haven't blown the head, right? There's no mixing of fluids in there. I've put some coolant in, which is why it looks a bit darker, but there's no mixing of fluids, there's no bubbles. That's fine. I'm getting no coolant flow. Like, by now, there should be water coming out of these and there's nothing. So the only obstacle it can be at this point, really, is the water pump. Happy days. A couple of things. The heater, nice and warm, because our heater controls are working now. I've just driven the car for a little bit, and I can't get it to overheat, because it had an airlock. They're a devil for it, these. So although it only took like a mile to overheat this morning, I've just taken it for a few miles more. I can't get it to overheat. I'm getting used to the gear change. I've tried to adjust that. I can't get it. It needs tools I don't have and stuff, so just have to learn it. But we've got coolant staying clean, no bubbles, and these, I won't do it now because everything's hot, but these, when I undo them, coolant actually comes out rather than just steam or air or froth, which I was getting at one point. So this is why you have all of these bleed points on these engines. They are notorious for airlocking. But now I've got good coolant flow. Obviously, I've still not got a thermostat in here at the moment, but I will reinstall that, and then I'll have to re-bleed everything all over again. Sounds good though. It sounds worse on camera than it does in person. This camera seems to make engines sound more harsh, but yeah, it's a happy little car.